the community. Dr. Franklin will introduce each of them in a moment. I want to recognize our president of the Nashville branch, Lee Wallace, who's here with us. And I was peeking around the room to see if we had any legislative persons, anyone that... Okay, so they're all gone. Okay, so now Dr. Franklin will speak to us about the relevance or the importance of the panel that we have before us today and introduce each of them. Thank you.
Greetings. My name is Sekou Franklin, and this is an innovative panel on innovations in criminal justice and police reforms. Before I get started, I want to make sure I told Denise Joseph that I want to recognize her. She's in the very back, raise your hand. She's very important, folks. She's with Google and Google Fiber. They have a diversity and tech inclusion project in Tennessee and Alabama. So for those of you,
why is she in the back? Why she's not why are you in that? You're always welcome at the front of our room.
Thank you. I always feel welcome at the front, but I feel more welcome at the front.
she's well known in the NACP circles in Nashville. So if anyone is interested in tech inclusion, particularly in the communities, to make sure you talk to Denise with that.
All of you talk to her. We know where you talk about.
So this panel looks at innovation in criminal justice and police reforms. And it's an important panel because right here under your nose, you have some of the biggest innovations and most important policy-based initiatives and community-based initiatives that are being advanced by people who are either affiliated with the NACP or people who are have strong ties to members of the NACP. And we're talking about serious policy initiatives that are really being anchored by grassroots folks who are on the front lines and in the trenches of reform initiatives regarding state and local policy. So our hope is that you in this room will be able to take from this panel ideas that you can then bring back to your communities and implement in your communities if they are relevant. Two of the panelists have to leave early, so we'll have to go first, but I'll introduce all the panelists together. First, we have Toronto Aikens. He's a soldier here in Nashville. He's done a lot of work around criminal justice and police reforms. He was one of our biggest organizers and advocates for Ban the Box, and right now he's leading some initiatives around youth-based violence. He has ties to Nashville and to Clarksville. We also have Jacola Lane right here. She is with the Nashville Bail Reform Initiative, that's administered by the Nashville Public Defender's Office, and is leading bail reform efforts. I hope that she can also give you some ideas of how to take that back to your communities. And she's also been one of the organizers for the Justice for Black Peace Coalition with Women's Family. We have Arnold Hayes. He's an NACP member. He's a delegate at this conference. Arnold Hayes is with Nashville Organized for Action and Hope, or NOAA. He's also with the Community Oversight Now Coalition that's working on a Citizens Review Board, a Community Oversight Board that will go to council, our hope is, in the next few weeks. Next to her, okay. Next to him, we have Don Harrington, and Don Harrington is with the organization called Free Hearts that works with women coming out of incarceration. And she's doing some great work around state legislation. They have a bill in the legislature right now. And then next to her is our great Jeannie Alexander with No Exceptions Prisons Collective. Did I get that right? A longtime advocate in the homeless and criminal justice reform community, has done a lot of work around prison-based issues and is well known in Nashville's advocacy community around those basic issues.
Thank you, Sekou. As you all know, criminal justice issues intersect and they seek to continuously derail and undermine so many of the steps that we take toward equity and justice in our communities. Criminal justice touches every issue that the NAACP is concerned about: housing, education. You just heard some very unfortunate information during our lunch hour. Good jobs, our vote, strong, stable families, the ability of our children to thrive, mass incarceration, sentencing reform, and we could go on and on. Today we're going to do things just a little different. We're going to have a conversation somewhat with each of our panelists about a few of these issues. Each of the panelists will speak to the subject where they are committing their time and community to do work on matters of criminal justice. What we'd like for them to tell you is a little bit about why they're doing this work, what personal experience, if any, that they bring to their work, what impact their work is making, or what they see as the desired outcomes. They will also tell you what you can do as community to support this work, and as we try to all help rebuild our communities. Thank you. So, Taranse, we're going to start out with you. We're going to start out with you, and then we're going to move down to Jeannie. And I'd like for you to just speak to us briefly about why you're committed to this work that you do.
Thank you very much, first for having me, for inviting me here. It is a pleasure and a humbling opportunity. I'm always grateful when I have an opportunity to speak on behalf of criminal reform, and not just dealing with adults, but also dealing with the juveniles. Because I was arrested when I was a juvenile, so I entered into the system as a juvenile at 17 years old. I served a total of 17 years in prison, and which is actually over half of my life. A little bit over 17 years, matter of fact, in Williamson County in a CCA facility. Actually, I had an illegal sentence, so I was over sentenced, so I definitely can touch on the sentencing system reform. So during my years of incarceration, I was locked up at a facility that housed over 3,000 men there. Of those 3,000 men, I say over 65% of those were African American men. Over 55% of those men that was incarcerated could not barely read or write. And that percentage of those men that was incarcerated, I say maybe around about 45 to 50% of those were under the age of 30 years old. Under the age of 30 years old, and I just happened to be one of those that was under the age of 30 years old. By the grace of God, the Lord changed my life. He changed my life. I believe in the power of education, so I got in the education program. I obtained my GED, 4 trades while I was in there, and then became a teacher aide, a tutor while I was in there to help those begin to fight for their lives back through the power of education. Because I believe that criminal reform or prison reform, however you want to word it, is impossible without education.
You're right, you're right.
We cannot educate those, and you cannot give those opportunity to start over without first educating those or re-educating those incarcerated. So now that I am out of prison, I have joined a partnership like with SAQ and Band of Box, Democracy Nashville. I'm passionate about making alliances with different organizations and different ministries that's doing the same work, because it's going to take us all together to come together to do this collective effort. I was released from prison in 2014. In 2014, I was, like I said, I fought hard to reform myself, got my GED, educated myself, was determined to get out and start my life back over, work hard, come back into society, be a productive member of society, and do everything the right way. So I applied for several jobs. That's how I got connected with Band of Box, because coming out of incarceration and connecting back with my family and with the workforce, I had so many doors that were shut for me. I applied for numerous jobs, and was denied. Not because I was not qualified for the jobs, but only because of my record. Strictly because of my record, I was denied many jobs, and I was actually told by one of them that if I did it once, that I would do it again. So eventually I ended up getting a job, even with the housing. We're even trying to get a housing with not wanting to go back into communities that were drug infested or gang infested or products of those things that lead to incarceration. Many doors were shut on me. I had one company when I tried to apply for a job to tell me that there was nothing that they could do for me because they go back on your records anywhere from 50 to 100 years. From 50 to 100 years. So I was denied housing. I was denied housing. Again, it was only by the grace of God and my resilience that I was allowed to finally get a place to stay and to live. Now, what I am doing now that I have been released from incarceration is I'm a big advocate for prison reform. I'm an advocate for education. I'm an advocate for youth gun violence and crime prevention. I have founded a nonprofit corporation and it's called Bless. It's Bless Incorporated. We focus on restoring damaged lives and communities to greatness for God's glory. So that is what we're going to do. For those who said that we can't make it, if you did it once, you'll do it again, we're going to prove them wrong. And we're coming up with innovative ways to get out here and to save our children. To get out here to save our children where the systems are failing them. With the corporation that we just did, we just had our first inner city kids spelling bee. It's for the inner city kids for us to invest in the importance of inner city kids' education, to work and to invest in their academic progress and achievement. We just had our youth community program, and it was called Not My Child. And it was a youth program to prevent youth gun violence and incarceration, because in the city of Nashville, we're losing our children to gun violence and we're losing them to incarceration. When I went promoting this in J.C. Napier and what they called Dodge City, there was gunfire right while I was in there. Those kids were 14 and 15 years old carrying guns. Carrying guns. 3 days after we had our gun violence youth prevention, a 15-year-old young black male was shot and murdered. And his girlfriend was standing right next to him and could have lost her lives. So we're definitely determined to get out here and do everything we can to save our youth. We also put on a youth gun violence basketball tournament. We did this on Monroe Park. It was called Hoop for Peace. And we had children coming from different neighborhoods, from the east side, from the west side, from the south side, and from different schools. They came and they played in this basketball tournament to Hoop for Peace. And that promoted youth unity against gun violence and incarceration. And it was very positive, it was productive, and we're going to continue to put on different events like this to counteract the negative energy that our youth is experiencing. Because if our youth is getting involved in negativity, then it's going to be those positive things that's going to save them. Right. So we have to come up with more positive programs to get our youth engaged and get them excited and to have them to stand up and fight for their own lives. Yeah. Because if the system is not going to fight for them and the system is failing them, then we have to motivate and inspire our children how to love themselves, to feel powerful, important, valuable, and to fight and stand up for their own lives. Yeah. Because the truth is that now the parents are not even raising their own kids, so kids are forced to raise themselves out here. So we have to help our kids to stay motivated, love themselves, value their education, and value their life, and that will begin to break the cycles of incarceration that is definitely a ripple effect in affecting our neighborhoods and our communities. So I'm definitely grateful for this opportunity. If there's any way that I can partner with anybody here, I'm willing to partner with you. Like I said, we are soldiers in this, and we are combating because we're not going to continue to stand back and let the system take our kids and lose them to incarceration.
Oh.
Former insiders on the panel. That is absolutely key. Because if you don't know who the experts are about prisons in America, it's insiders.
Yeah.
Prisoners know, people know what they need, people's families know what they need, and they know what reform has to look like.
Right.
But looking outside the prisons and neighborhoods for the experts. So thank you, and thank you for your work. So, focusing on your 3 questions, you know, like why do you do this work, personal experience, and the impact and desired outcomes. So the reason I do this work is because I've been a witness to not mass incarceration, I mean certainly mass incarceration, but I've been a witness to modern slavery in America. And too many people are not naming it, and they're not talking about it, and not speaking about it for what it is. So my background is in law and theology. I'm an attorney and a minister. And a lot of people in Nashville would never have expected me to go into the prison and work in that system. I got so many phone calls, but in 2009, I went into Riverbend Maximum Security Institution. And I was there for 5 years, and I was there as their head chaplain. Now, any prison system crazy enough to hire a lawyer and put him on the inside, you can observe what is going on. What do you expect to have happen? So, I was there for 5 years, and in those 5 years, what I learned was that I received the best education of my life in awareness and understanding systems, and understanding capitalism, and understanding racism, and intentional directed poverty in America in that prison system. My best teachers, who I owe the direction my life has taken to, I owe the commitments I've made, my best teachers have been prisoners, many of whom are still locked up beside the walls of Tennessee prisons. Now, I was never supposed to come out and say that. I was supposed to come out and spend my time there telling people that, you know, thank God for the prison system because you all need to be protected, you know, because there are a lot of violent, scary people in here, and, you know, you just need to keep praying for them, okay? Well, excuse me, I don't mean to offend, but that is bullshit. Okay? And the only way that we continue to see what we've seen over 600% increase in incarceration in America in the past 30 years, the only way this continues is because the American public is being sold a lie.
That's right.
And so, have any of you ever heard, I'm sure you have the expression, how sometimes that the good can become the enemy of the great?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So be careful of that, because that is real. You know, one of the things is that national conversation has kind of shifted, and the conversation is shifting in even southern states. Folks are now beginning to talk about nonviolent drug offenders. Well, let's talk about this, and I think that's important because our drug laws are racist, they're targeted, they're draconian, and they need to go.
Right.
Okay?
Yeah.
Because this is a medical issue. This is an issue of addiction. All right? That is absolutely true. But as long as we can continue to hear that and not hear the rest of the story, which is that nonviolent drug offenders only make up 15% of folks on the inside. We are not going to end mass incarceration until we start talking about folks who have been labeled violent offenders. And you know what else I learned in prison was that terms like victim and offender are slippery. Because I never knew a man on the inside who committed murder who had not been a victim of violence or sexual abuse as a child. Who had not themselves first experienced violence. There's a saying in restorative justice that hurt people hurt people.
That's right.
And if our solution is to continue to say, well, you know what, we're going to make these people disappear forever, that is no solution. That is no healing. So we're going to continue to break apart families, destabilize communities, and then as we continue to lengthen sentences, and Tennessee adopted the harshest truth in sentencing laws in 1995, then we permanently destabilize families. There is no coming home for the prodigal. So then what do we get? We get the kind of gentrification we're seeing in North Nashville, where you would have had stable families who own their own homes, and now you have absentee landlords who live in Brentwood who are waiting to sell out as quickly as they can to high-rises and tall and skinnies, and we're losing our historic neighborhoods. while I was on the inside, I began organizing with and collaborating with the prisoners, insiders. Because I knew that people know what they need. And so we started talking about what does prison reform look like to a prisoner? Not some expert on the inside who's going to take small steps and pat us on the back and make us feel good. So we think that we have changed the system, because we don't need to just change the system, we need to disrupt this system. We need to abolish mass incarceration. So as I began organizing, letting insiders take the lead, we created what No Exceptions would look like. And that's a collective that works jointly with folks who are still on the inside. We have board members who are behind those walls. Because guess what? There are a lot of competent, smart, focused people with solutions behind those walls. And then we have board members on the outside, everything from clergy to lawyers, to professors, family members of insiders. So the focus is to work together to reform sentencing laws, to change these sentencing laws, to roll back the 95 truth in sentencing laws, to address internal prison conditions. Okay? Because what form of 2.3 million Americans locked in metal cages the size of small bathrooms is the acceptable form of that? So we can't stop talking about internal prison conditions. And then also in Tennessee, a parole board that is accountable to no one, with no consistency and no justice there. And in the mix of all of this, this goes to sentencing and it goes to internal conditions. We have got to end the privatization of prisons in this country. Private prisons are trading flesh on the stock market. And there's only one word for that, and that is slavery in America.
That's right.
And if the prison itself isn't privatized, then everything within that prison has been privatized. Medical inside our state prisons now is all private. We organized a class action lawsuit around hepatitis C, because out of over 3,000 insiders with hepatitis C, 8 were receiving treatment. And they must be paid for that. Private prisons have exactly no incentive to help restore or rehabilitate, to reduce recidivism, because their bottom line depends on people coming back. Their only duty runs to shareholders. None of this is okay. So in my experience and in my work on the inside, one of the things I learned is that despite whatever crime someone had been convicted of, when I was working with men, and I worked with men, I was in a men's maximum security prison. The guys I worked with who were 40, who had killed someone when they were 18, 19, 20 in a crazy situation, they were not the same person.
Right.
None of us is the same person we were 20 years ago or 25. And our communities are stronger, they are better when we bring our family members home. But if they don't want strong community members, you keep them locked up. See, I've come to believe that this is very intentional. And the best way to ensure it keeps going is to always blame the offender for everything, and to never discuss or address systemic issues. So to that end, so what we're doing, the impact, our desired outcomes, we work through legislation, litigation, and education. Because as has already been stated, education is the key to bringing this whole system down. And I am not afraid to say that is absolutely what I'm committed to, is to bring it down. Do I ever think there's a need for some social segregation sometimes? Sure, that happens, but what we should be committed to is healing. Because this system doesn't heal victims, it re-victimizes them. So one of our bills that we advance is a bill, House Bill 135, and that is to reduce life sentences with possibility of parole in the state. See, if you commit first-degree murder in the state of Tennessee, you can get the death penalty, life without parole, or life with parole. But because we enacted the strictest truth in sentencing laws in the country, our life with parole now is 51 calendar years. That's with a good time. So we've got 3 death sentences in this state. We've got 1,200 people serving time who are jury intended to go before a parole board one day, and they are never going to. And I can tell you, I've gone to dozens and dozens of parole board hearings, and one of the things that's occurred to me in the past 2 years is our parole board doesn't have any idea they're not going to see any more lifers. So if somebody had a father or a daughter or an uncle, right, who went in and did a life sentence before, got out and got 26 years, other family members and other people we know aren't going to get that chance. This bill saves the state $700 million. Now, if Beth Harwell, the Republican Speaker of the House, can look me in the eyes 2 years in a row and say, those sentencing laws in 1995, those are a failure. Some people don't want them to go because they want to be in check on crime, but we have to repeal them. If she can get it, then anybody can get it. And we've got to keep fighting and not accept good legislation that doesn't really change things. It will be the enemy of great. The other 2 pieces of legislation, really quick, I just want to tell you about. One, we have a resolution that we call Amendment 33. Article 1, Section 33 of the Tennessee Constitution is the Tennessee statement on the abolition of slavery. It looks pretty much like the 13th Amendment of our federal Constitution, which we were all taught abolishes slavery, except it doesn't, it creates an exception. So again, you can target the intended population. So this resolution, sponsored by Joe Towns, Representative Towns from Memphis, would repeal what's known as the criminality clause in our abolition statement and the Tennessee Constitution, so that we have universal abolition of slavery. And then finally, we're supporting legislation that will bring back independent oversight of the Department of Correction. Because quite frankly, we've got a department with $1 billion a year budget that has control over 30,000 human lives, and there's no oversight. For 2 years in a row, Republicans have run bills to bring back that oversight. And for 2 years in a row, oversight over corrections has been amended out of the bills. Well, we don't need to know what's going on. We could tell you what's going on. People are dying. People are dying from neglect. People are dying from violence. People are suffering from solitary confinement. The United Nations says more than 18 days on solitary confinement is torture. I have known people serving over 11 years. That's what's going on. So, what I hope is that we'll all be willing to look with open eyes and stop giving the system the benefit of the doubt. Because we're going to keep paying for it, and our children are going to keep paying for it. So yes, we have to disrupt cycles at the front end, and also help people at the back end with reentry. But you can't forget about 30,000 enslaved lives in metal boxes in Tennessee today.
Okay, how can I follow that? Okay, and I'm a little bit different, so I just want to start out by just saying, you know, I'm not like a lot of people on the panel. I just happen to be an engineer and computer scientist, you know. I'm also a theologian. So I want to kind of just start out by telling you all kind of where I'm coming from, because having lived in this African-American male body for all these years, that really is why I do the work that I do. First of all, I stand on the shoulders of so many people, you know, whether it's my grandparents, you know, people in my community. That's one of the reasons. Also, I'm not from Tennessee, I'm from Alabama, central Alabama. I grew up going to like mass meetings during the civil rights movement. And as a kid, I'm looking at, listening to speakers like Stokely Carmichael and H. Rap Brown. And I guess even though I've gotten a lot more years on me now, that's why I'm not so critical of young people, because back then, those were people that kind of got my attention, you know, at the meetings and everything. Also, I want to leave a legacy for my children and also for my grandbaby. And now, and I started out by also saying I come from different vantage points. Being a theologian, I'm a Luke 4 person and a Matthew 25 person.
All right.
When it talks about, you know, the Spirit of the Lord is upon me to do these different things like releasing the captives and those, but also looking out for the least of these.
Yeah.
So I can't just stay in the temple. I got to be out in the streets and the byways, and the hedges and the byways doing things. So that's where I'm coming from. And then also, when I was an intern, a co-worker of mine, I was interning in St. Louis as an engineer intern, and we were driving while black. And I ended up having a gun pointed at me because I was driving while black. Now the person I was riding with, they were from South Carolina, but they were looking for somebody from North Carolina. But hey, it must be them because they're black. So, and then also, something that stays in my mind is Frederick Douglass, you know, where he says the person that is struck is the one that will cry out. The person that has endured the humility of slavery is the one that will seek liberty. So that's another reason why I do what I do. Also, because staying in your place don't work.
That's right.
Those of you all that think that if you just go along and you follow all the rules, we used to be told that just get your education and you'll be fine. I worked for a number of companies and everything, and just your education doesn't get it. I can tell you all, and that's one thing when I was growing up, people always used to say, oh, that boy's smart. That boy, I always got encouragement. So when I was working at Ford Motor Company, there were at least 3 cutting-edge ideas that I came up with. I proposed those things. And I should have probably right now be on a beach somewhere because I'm so wealthy. But it didn't happen because my proposals were turned down. Now, you always have someone that's willing to listen. So, say for example, you may have some managers, they say, oh man, that's a good idea. But then the majority end up ruling against me. So that's what I'm saying. So speak up when, and that's another thing, speak up when you're at the table. I have been in so many situations, whether it's been in corporate America, whether it's been in the denomination that I'm with. If I would just be quiet, I'd probably do pretty good. But then I wouldn't be able to live with myself. And I gotta tune that on self be true. Okay, and now, why does Nashville, and because we're talking about the Community Oversight Board, why does Nashville need a Community Oversight Board? Well, first of all, it's a national problem, that police misconduct. And I want to give you an example because a lot of times we talk about the technical things, but 50 years ago, if people basically, if a parent came to, a child went to a parent, and they said, I was sexually abused by a pastor, a teacher, or a doctor, more than likely it wouldn't be believed. And so what I'm saying is, sexual abuse goes under the radar. So in that particular case with child abuse, that you would probably tell that child, stop telling those lies. No upstanding person like that would do anything like that. No pastor or teacher would ever say such a horrible thing. You must have done something to cause this, or you misinterpreted the situation. This probably wouldn't have happened, and you would have just showed a little respect, young man. So child sexual abuse is, the majority of figures that I mentioned, they would never do that. But you have that small percentage that would.
Right.
And it's the same thing when it comes to the police. You have a small percentage that would.
Right.
And they mess it up for everyone. And so when we start talking about the police, it's the same thing. Victims are told, no police officer would ever do that. We're told we must have done something wrong to provoke the police officer. And we're also said, you ought to respect them. And police, as a result of, they usually get off. Usually the victims, they're blamed, and then the police usually get off. Now, one way that I can think of that this situation with misconduct is different from police is that usually when it comes to abuse, child abuse, it covers all racial lines.
Right.
But when it comes to this problem, it's usually people of color.
That's right.
So that's why a lot of times you have a lot of people, they're not concerned about it because it does not happen to them. And we had in some of the other sessions, we talked about if my gay brother and sister is suffering, I'm suffering. If my Hispanic or my Asian brother and sister, I'm suffering. So that's what I'm saying. Just because it doesn't happen to you, that doesn't mean it's not a problem. And so, said all that to say, we have a coalition in Nashville. We're calling it Community Oversight Now. And we're calling for a community oversight board, and we have a core group of members. And this is something that I'm so proud of. This is cutting edge, folks. When you can have organizations like Black Lives Matter, Democracy Nashville, Gideon's Army, Justice for Jaquez, NAACP, NOAA, Surge, which is showing up for racial justice, Workers' Dignity, and Music City Riders, those are our core groups. We don't agree on everything.
That's right.
But we decided as a group that we were going to come around and we're going to work on a community oversight board. And this is ground up. We don't have where the mayor is deciding to tell us this is what we need. These community organizations decided to come together and we said this is what we want for Nashville. And not that we didn't get any results. And I want to also pause because we do have support from the ACLU, but more important, we have support from the TNSC NAACP conference because they have supported us. We've had brunches, we've had town halls. They spent a little t-shirts. They spent a little bit of money on that
too, by the way.
We have. So yeah. And I'm going to be a little bit quicker because y'all don't know, but I've been a widower for almost a year, and my wife would always tell me, "Get to the point." Get to the point. So I am going to get to the point. COBs have existed for over 40 since the 1940s. All over the country, they say, "Oh, we just love Dr. Martin Luther King Jr." Well, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. called for a COB in 1964 and 1966.
That's right.
So Mayor Barry, go back and listen to Dr. King. Most often they're established when there are allegations of police brutality. Usually in the case of Michael Brown, actually I'm trying to think of California, Rodney King, they usually start them then. And even, unfortunately, it would have been good if Nashville could have done this before Mr. Jacquez Clemens was killed. And also the NAACP in Nashville, they called for one in 1990 also. Memphis started one in 1994, and they restarted it back in 2016. And let's see here, let's see, like an overview. U.S. cities, in most U.S. cities, the police themselves. That's why we want to have an outside agency. Let's see, I can skip through some of this. Why are we pushing for it in Nashville? We started pushing for this even though the police and the mayor is dead set against it. And that's an example too. We have 3 forms of government. We have a 40-member council. We decided we were not going to let them turn us around. We decided to use that avenue. And we only need 21 votes, and I think we're going to get to 21 votes. I want to get 35 because I think we have to say overwhelmingly that we need this so the mayor and the police chief can, oh, okay, I guess I better go along with this. Okay, The C funding, we're calling for $1.5 million roughly. We're calling for a staff of 15 paid staff. A lot of the boards around the country, all they have is a board, but we realized we needed staff.
That's right.
The majority of the board is recommended by community organizations. So we have slots on our board that we're calling for where organizations like the NAACP will recommend one of those representatives for that board. NOAA may recommend a representative. Black Lives Matter may recommend a representative. So that's what I'm saying. So it won't just be, again, like the mayor decides, who do I like? And let me put them on this board. But it's community organizations. And we'll have a couple from the mayor's office and a couple from the council. Let's see. We are proposing the strongest oversight allowed by the Metro Charter and Tennessee law. We're going for that. Something else that's unique, and I'm just about finished, y'all. Something else that's unique is that we're also going to be responsible for policy review. For example, if I get stopped on the interstate and on a highway, and I get stopped, and I know I have a bunch of speeding tickets, and I'm afraid of what's going to happen, so I get out of my car and I just start running. What should be the procedure? Should the officer stand down, or should the officer just chase after me with a gun? So, because in that particular situation, they have my car.
Right.
So they're going to eventually find out who Arnold Hayes is anyway.
Right.
So policy review, and it's not just the police department. When it comes to the DA's office, when it comes to the judges, we will be looking into policy review, because if we're going through all of these cases, we will probably come up with some ideas and recommend some changes. And again, I'm proud of this coalition that we pulled together. We have groups that are really good at doing protests. We have groups that are really good at understanding the politics that's behind doing this work. We have groups that are good doing organizational structure. They are good at emailing people. We also have people that are good at doing testimonies about what has happened to them. These groups came together to try to call for this review board. And usually when we do this, we usually have a bunch of handouts to hand out that has information. So after this, if you want more information, this coalition, we can send you all kind of information if you're thinking about doing something like that in your city. And I would just like to ask all the coalition members that are here, if you just raise your hand and let them know that you're in the coalition. Yes. All right, thank you.
Hello, so I'm Dawn Harrington, and I'm the executive director of Free Hearts. We're an organization that's based here in Nashville, and is led by formerly incarcerated women, including myself, which provides education, support, and advocacy for families impacted by incarceration. I'm also the systems manager of the National Council for Incarcerated and Formerly Incarcerated Women and Girls. So my why, like I said, I'm formerly incarcerated. I'm actually from Nashville. I went to UFOG, and everybody's path to incarceration is different. Mine was basically a business trip to another city, and I didn't know what the laws were, and it ended me to where I had to do a year on Rikers Island. And the judge was saying that ignorance to the law was not a defense. So once I got in there and kind of got over the initial, shock of being in that situation, I really got a chance to look around and see what was going on, all around me. Being in a women's facility, most of the women that I was in there with had children, and I don't have children still to this day, and at that time I didn't. And you know, every other day I'm like, okay, I want to have kids, I don't want to have kids. So I'm still on the fence about that. But I don't think I've ever had a time where, you know, I was actually happy that I did not have children, like the time when I was incarcerated. Just, you know, most of these families were just getting broken up left and right, and it wasn't because of, you know, a lot of what we see on the media about people that are incarcerated, and you just see all these scary people, you know, and I was incarcerated with some of the most brilliant women that I ever met in my whole life, you know, and, you know, they were, a lot of them, you know, lost their children, and because of, you know, different laws like the Adoption and Safe Families Act, permanently lost their children, because you only have a certain amount of time to, you know, get back out, get on your feet, get housed, and get your children, and find ways to get your children back before you permanently lose your parental rights. So that's really why I got into this work. I was determined that when I got out that I would advocate for the families, because just seeing, you know, most of the women that I spoke with, they either had some type of mental illness, substance abuse illness, or just years of trauma, you know, and that's, I mean, I hate the word second chances, because a lot of people, from what I saw, didn't even have a first chance. So that's the place from which I come to this work in my personal experience. What we do with Free Hearts, we, like I said, we do support education and advocacy. We do support groups inside of the jail, inside of juvenile, inside of the school system for students whose parents are incarcerated. And we teach parent management, parenting classes, mostly for the purpose of reuniting families, because that's mostly a prerequisite for getting your custody back, that you have to do a parenting class. And we also do advocacy. So we actually work with Jacola on participatory defense, and we're organizing families of loved ones who are currently facing charges, just to help to impact the outcome of their cases. And it's tough work. We had a rough situation this morning where a mom, you know, got 28 years at 100% in prison, and you know, she's black, and you know, there was another case recently with a white woman, the same profile of the case, and she only got a plea deal offer of 20 years at 30%. So another thing that we do is a storytelling for public policy program, and it's basically where we use our experiences to inform policy change. So our first bill that we got introduced in this session is the primary caretaker bill. It's House Bill 825, and it's a sentencing bill that considers the child when sentencing a nonviolent offense, and when you identify that it is a primary caretaker of this child, that they can get an alternative to incarceration. And I want to just say this real quick before I go forward, because like Jeannie, I don't really believe in separating nonviolent and violent, but we had to do this because the legislators really pushed back, and it was just kind of like a compromise that we had to make for right now. And we can maybe try to revisit, you know, in forward, because one thing, I mean, you know, if you use the public safety argument for, you know, always saying, okay, nonviolent instead of violent. Most violent people that are considered violent, that the recidivism rate is so low for those people. So, I mean, I never understood that, but I will say that right now. And in layman's terms, what this bill does is find ways as a community to get to the root of the issue while keeping the family together, as opposed to disrupting the family, you know, letting the family be apart, sending a person to a jail or a prison, where the problem isn't going to get fixed because there are no corrections in corrections. It's just going to exacerbate the problem that already is there and re-traumatize and, you know, add new trauma, because I saw some, I mean, men, you know, captains that, you know, punched women in the face so many times to where it was, you know, to where they were unrecognizable. So you're going to have new trauma on top of the trauma and illness that you already have. So what this bill does is as a community where we can get to the root of the issue. If you need substance abuse support, if you need mental illness support, let's do that. But in the meantime, let's keep your family together. Let's not just throw you in a cage and let's just work on the problem together as a community. And the reason why this is important in our state, because we are actually leading the country in the prevalence of parental incarceration. We are locking up more parents in our state than most of the other states. We are actually tied for third place in the whole country for the prevalence of parental incarceration. 1 in 10 children have a parent or both parents that are incarcerated.
Yes. I want to ask a question. Are those recent statistics?
Yes.
And is the opioid epidemic, is that driving that up, or was it already there?
Yes, that is statistic from 2016, and I'm sure it has been driven up by the opioid crisis. So, okay. Parental incarceration is an adverse childhood experience, but you know, I don't have to tell y'all that, because I mean, can you just imagine what it would be like, you know, if your parent or parents were incarcerated, you were trying to grow up and navigate the world. And it disproportionately affects our communities as far as African American communities. Black women are incarcerated at a rate of 3 times that of white women, and children, black children are 7 times more likely to have one or both parents incarcerated. And lastly, you know, alternatives to incarceration are less expensive for our state, and they're more effective. You know, the thing is, like I said, jail or prison, it doesn't fix anything. It doesn't fix anything. You know, it just makes the problems worse. So we're all about, you know, getting to the root of the issue, and to me that doesn't include throwing somebody away and locking away the key. So, thank you.
Before Jacola closes out, one of our panelists did not show up today, and the reason why I wanted her to come has a lot to do with the presentation that Ms. Harrington gave. She is from a multi-generational felony family, and she came to me 2 weeks ago because her son is now in a facility. I think she called it the Johnson facility here in Nashville on 2nd Avenue. And I asked her what it was like. She said, "Miss Jackie, is not good." She is heart-sickened. She should have never secured a family. Had she not been in Williamson County, I don't think she would have ever secured a felony. But her mother spent an extensive time in jail. Now she's a mother, and she's looking at, and she has a felony charge, and now she's looking at the possibility of her son receiving a felony charge. And he was a good student prior to going to this facility. So she's looking searching desperately for ways that she can keep her son from following in the footsteps of his grandmother and his mother, but she's not finding the solutions that she needs here in Davidson County. And she works at a reentry organization where she's been over 5 years. So she understands and knows the system.
I think that's Johnson Alternative School.
That's what it is.
And that shows the direct connection between what's happening in our schools
Right.
and the prisons.
And the
Right.
prison. That's right.
That's exactly where he is.
That's the pipeline.
Johnson Alternative School is basically a mini juvenile. My mentee was at Johnson last year. Good afternoon, my name is Jacola Lane. I currently am the Nashville Community Bail Reform Advocate. So I am working with local partners and national partners to end cash money bail. That's the first thing that pretty much happens when someone is arrested, when they are taken downtown to night court. Here recently in Nashville, they weren't even bringing the defendants up to the night court when the bail was even set. So they weren't even considering what type of, barriers that may be for them, paying about, they just said it. And in Nashville, it is beyond, ridiculous amounts of bail that's set. And just for example, recently, these are misdemeanor averages, by the way. On average, we are seeing about $5,200 for a misdemeanor charge in Nashville. Bail. That's the average in 2016 for misdemeanor. And just to compare it to other cities, in New York City, the misdemeanor bail average is $1,000.
Wow.
So that just shows you that here in Nashville and in the South in general, we have a huge problem. The Nashville Community Bail Fund has been in existence since June of 2016. Actually, Jeannie was the first advocate who would actually go into the jails and go into the bonding office to bail folks out, who were basically just sitting there, innocent, presumed innocent, waiting until their court appearance. And I think that's what we really need to understand is that you are presumed innocent until proven guilty. And right now we are operating unconstitutional in Nashville. This is going on in Nashville and Nashville. And I think people don't recognize that this really became prevalent again with the Khalif Browder story. I don't know if anyone is familiar with the young man, but he actually was arrested in the Bronx, New York. And he was 16 at the time. He was sent to Rikers Island, same facility that Don was at. Abused, treated inhumanely, and he was not able to pay bond. And then they actually did away with the bond that he had, and he had to stay there 3 years right on just his day in court in the city of New York. He was eventually released. They dismissed it. He had terrible mental issues as a result of it. It is just a tragic story. But what I want you to understand is right here in Nashville, we have our own Khalif Browders. We have juveniles who are being transferred over as adults here in Nashville, who are definitely innocent in some cases. Don and I have visited the juvenile center. We've shown up to court dates for family support. We have parents who come to us whose their children have already been convicted and are treated inhumanely right here in Nashville, Tennessee, in prisons and in jails. So we just want to bring awareness to that, and we also want to change the way that this whole entire system is working and not working for our people and our loved ones. Why I do this, first I got involved with the Justice for Jacquees Coalition when Jacquees Clemens was killed by Officer Joshua Lippert. I got involved, one, because I went to school with his sister, and second, because my uncle, Timothy Lane, was actually killed as well in 2000 by a Metro Nashville police officer. So this is very close to me. I have cousins who have been incarcerated at Riverbend, as Jeannie has mentioned, and I remember going with my grandmother to visits and being turned away by the silliest things. And I mean, all my classmates going, I don't know a black family that I grew up with around me, my neighbors, who have not been impacted. DUIs or, you know, just general misdemeanor stuff, who passed away in 2015, but I mean, was a hardworking man, worked at Vanderbilt for over 34 years. I mean, these are the type, like, these are not, you know, what you see on the news at night, and you automatically think, oh my gosh, like, this person is just oh so bad. You know, these people should have their right to fight, and right now they aren't because of these crazy systems that we deal with. And the first system that comes into play is bail that I'm working on. The judges can completely control how that is, you know, being administered, and they are not. If it's not a misdemeanor, I mean, some of them you see, and I mean, well over 50. I mean, we have juveniles with $100,000, $200,000, $300,000 bonds. They know their families can't make those bonds. It's not even, you know, a question of them even being able to afford to get out on bond and pay an attorney and do all these other things that you have to do to even stay afloat. And a lot of our families are, you know, in survival mode and have other barriers. So we are an immediate relief to some of our families, and I go into the jails to interview. Sometimes I even go to the basement where they house folks at the courthouse when they are waiting to go to court in the basement. I go talk to the folks and I get them out of jail so they can return to their homes, so they you know, aren't put out, so they can return to their jobs, so they don't lose their jobs, because sometimes it can be 6 to 8 months before they even get a date to even go to court. So we offer that immediate relief, and there's about 20 different bail funds that's going on nationally, and I'm connected nationally to the work that's going on. And so our desired outcomes are to end money bail. There are bonding companies who will definitely put up a fight. You know, they have lobbyists and whatnot, but I've been advocating since I was 14 years old, and if you ask me, bonding companies are predatory lenders, just like the payday loans that are popping up on every corner in our neighborhoods. So this is why I do what I do, and I'll keep it short. So the way that the community bail fund works is we actually receive donations. And so, you know, we are able to get folks out. We do not use bonding companies because, again, I think they're predatory, so I'm not going to partner with them. So we pay the full cash bond when we go to get these folks out, and not the 10% that the bonding companies have to pay. They do not have to pay us a dime back. We do have a partnership with the criminal clerk's office where once their case is resolved, and over 97% of our clients have showed up to court, haven't had an issue. And that's supposedly the reason why we held bail in the first place, is to get people to show back up to court. But our folks do not have an issue showing back up to court. And if there is a reason they haven't showed up to court, you know, we had people who have passed away, have overdosed, because they're not getting the help that they need. Things of that nature. But 97% have showed back up to court, and we're able to get those refunds back and put it back into our accounts and get more people back out to pay for it.
Well, because we ran over, we only have about 10 minutes to entertain a few questions, so.
Make sure it's a question now, not a comment.
Yeah, not a comment.
Really brief question. What was the number of that bill again that you referenced?
It's House Bill 825.
Thank you.
He was good.
All right.
Any other questions?
Oh, let me say this too, I'm sorry. If you want a fact sheet on the bill, Aisha Hampton right here, she has one, and if you want to sign up to get more information, then make sure that she gets your information as well.
All presidents, please give her your information.
Just briefly, I wanted to give a shout out to Free Hearts, because that bill, they worked magic. They're negotiating right now with the chair of the Judiciary Committee. It's a hard negotiation process. He's from Robertson County. I checked him out. He's from Cottonwood, I believe. Like 3,000 people. mid-30s, and is adjudicating judicial policy that affects North Nashville, Memphis, and other folks, and representing the town of 3,000 is only mid-30s. And they work magic trying to twist his arm.
What's the maximum bond you can make, and what's the criteria for people that you make bonds for?
Sure, so right now, the maximum we can do is 5,000. The maximum we can do right now per charge, sometimes they break it out per charge, is 5,000. And it's limited right now because that's what the criminal court judges would allow. The judges can control the whole thing. If they want to do away with the bail system, they could grant it. But they did allow us to have an order to where we can do up to 5,000 per charge for someone who is currently incarcerated in Davidson County. And the requirements, pretty much, I just sit down and talk with them. As long as, they are pretty much here in Davidson County, I can get working telephone numbers for them or family members. I'm pretty much able to help them out. There have been some people who has been referred to me by the public defender's office who I didn't feel comfortable getting out, but that's because they don't live here in Davidson County. And if you already have barriers, it's going to be, more barriers for you to get back to court. To handle this, but I have been able to still, talk with their families or whomever they have on the outside who support them to come up with different creative ways to be able to support them and possibly get them free or get them to a bond reduction. Because a lot of times, they shouldn't even have a bill set. If they have support, they can come and ask to be released on their own recognizance. That's the first thing by law, state law, that they're supposed to be going to when they go to night court. And less than 5% of people who's arrested in Tennessee are released on their own recognizance. Second, they could do an unsecured bond. Last in 2016, there was like 0 of those that happened. And then that's when they're supposed to go to money bail. So we're not even going by our own state law.
Organizations like yours, how did you happen to do yours? Are they in other areas? Do you have a network of them, et cetera?
So currently, like I said, there's about 20 organizations, mostly nonprofits because we do have to have the solicitation license throughout the country. And that is done through the National Bail Fund Network. And currently the Nashville Bail Fund sits under Just City out of Memphis, and that's where it's housed. But I'm from Nashville. I grew up in East Nashville, which is completely gentrified now. But anyway, it sits under Just City as a project, and that's how we're able to work out of.
I have a question. I got a big mouth. Last year, the system gave out 14,277 warrants on people that hadn't paid bills, and so they took their license and everything. I went down and talked to the clerk, and they said that they could drop some of those charges if the county commissioners allowed it. Is that legal for the county commissioners to demand that they charge those people, keep them in jail?
It's not. There's actually a lawsuit that just was filed in Just City. Just City actually is in partnership with some folks out of Memphis and some other organizations who's actually suing the state, but for all those suspended driver's license offenses. It was literally like just filed recently, and there was an article that was sent out. So maybe I can forward it to say who you can see, and he can forward it over to you.
Excellent.
Our last question, Representative.
Hey, Crew, you were successful in getting the bandbox removed here in Nashville. I'm concerned about Rutherford County. How can we proceed in having that same issue dealt with in Rutherford County?
he saw any issue, whether it be. We got it removed for Metro government, which basically is asking how could we have it removed for Rutherford County government. But have to go to the county commission, or if it's just Murfreesboro, in particular, have to go to Murfreesboro City Council. And in Nashville, we were limited by the charter, because it's a weird thing in Nashville. The charter would not allow us to make any changes to municipal employment unless it was a charter referendum. But the caveat for that, the secondary issue for us, the advantage was that we had a safety valve, but that was the Civil Service Commission. So we did our research. Erica Gilmore in 2012, few people know this, actually sponsored a resolution asking the Civil Service Commission to do they call it fair chance. A fair chance of box policy review. They never did it. So when we did the charter referendum, they threw 1,000 of our petitions out because of the purge voter law. We had that secondary safety valve, where because we had 10,000 plus petitioners, mayoral election too, we had public pressure. The Civil Service Commission took notice, and of course, we were able to go to the Civil Service Commission with help from quite a few folks. There required a lot of research and analysis. SIU gave us some insight on how the Civil Service Commission operated. Ironically, just a secondary note, we had the Human Resource Agency. Am I getting right? Metro News?
Relational.
Okay. No, not commission. Human resources. Oh, personnel. Yeah. Believe it or not, their deputy director was an African American who actually collected petitions for us at his church. So we had to, we just, so all that being said is that, it was very extraordinarily hard, quite frankly. Jackie, it took us 2 years, 18 months. So we had to build capacity, build the street game. We had, I won't say we planned it like this. We probably not about 100 volunteers. We did an organizational tree. We had a coordinating committee. Each of the coordinating committee had responsibilities for petitions. All that being said, it's just building capacity, staying to it, having staying power, and trying to really dissect how the law works, how the government works, how the structure works. And it took us 18 months. So doing that in Rutherford County for any of these issues, that's what it's going to require. Maybe we can talk about that, because that's a different animal.
I just wanted to also mention, because all the different cities here are different in terms of their size, but when it came to the oversight board, when I said $1.5 million, I also want to mention that Metro's budget is around $1 billion. So 1.5 million is very small. And then I also wanted to mention too that, and this is something that Dr. Franklin has mentioned a lot, when it comes to other cities, they have so many lawsuits that cities are paying out money. And we were talking, I think it was like $600 million Chicago. They're paying out about that much. So what I'm saying is, it will eventually, a lot of the costs will be paid for anyway. So, okay.
Excellent panel, excellent.
Thank you. We appreciate it.